I'm just going to say it. I love Star Wars Andor, and it feels so good to say that about a Star Wars property again, because it's been a while since I could have properly said that. Hello, interwebs! I am here, as always, to review the latest episode of Star Wars Andor, this time Season 1, Episode 4, Aldhani. Like I just said, this is another excellent episode of Andor, just building off the momentum of the 3-episode premiere that we got last week, and I really kind of want to take a minute before I get into the nitty-gritty of this review and just sort of go through the episode to articulate why I think this show is so fantastic, because I really just want to display my excitement for this show and why I really think that this is what I hope Star Wars continues to be going forward, but sells itself in a way that is a little bit more palatable or a little bit more mainstream. Because while this is a Star Wars show, one of the things that's kind of frustrating me a little bit in the discourse, and to a degree I understand why, is that a lot of people haven't really jumped onto this show because it hasn't seemed like a show that many people would be interested in just on the face of it as a Star Wars property. I mean, when you hear about something like Star Wars Obi-Wan with Ian McGregor coming back, that gets everybody excited, and that show just saw a bunch of ratings because that's sort of what everyone knows. And to a degree, that is what Disney kind of banks on when they bank on nostalgia and they bank on these sort of like big, like, hey, member berries kind of things, like, do you remember this thing? We're doing it again, or we're getting this big actor, that sort of thing. But with Andor, it's a show that's about a character that was kind of a side character in a side movie that I don't think a lot of people bought in on. And so I saw a lot of the ratings talk around this show, as well as the like interest on Twitter and even my own reviews compared to like other Star Wars things that I've reviewed on my channel, the views on that. I really just don't see the like level of interest that I think is commiserate with the quality of the show. But to a degree, that's probably why this show was able to get made by Disney, because if it was a show that had Obi-Wan in it, like I said last week, it would have a lot more hands in the pie with like Disney executives, and it wouldn't be what this show really is showcasing to me is its greatest strengths. And getting to that, its greatest strengths are the fact that it is really just showing us a ground level Star Wars that I think not only is just like interesting to see a story about characters who aren't like the big Jedi. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my Obi-Wans, I love my Anakins, I love my operatic Jedi Sith battles, but because this is that ground level, what it is allowing us to do that is, I think, more important to me than just the fact that we are seeing everyday people in these stories is actually kind of retain the heart of what Star Wars always was, going back to like A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and George Lucas's original intent. I'm not saying like George Lucas's vision, but those movies were incredibly political. I mean, he literally had it be sort of a allegory for things like the Viet Cong and other rebellion groups fighting against these big fascist empires. And that sort of got lost in the more mythic stories that we got to see in Disney's Star Wars, because again, it's being made by a big corporate company. But because this isn't a more under the radar show that doesn't have as many like stakes in it in terms of like the Star Wars brand, you get to see so many moments of this show just ringing so true to me about like what rebellions actually are like, what ground level pushing back against fascism and dictatorships, authoritarianism is actually like, in a way that's not just showcasing like the messiness of rebellions, but also showcasing to us the indifferent bureaucracy of the Empire. Like, normally in a big Star Wars show, you'd want to have like the Darth Vaders, the Emperors, these like big fascist dictator people. But here we get to see the bureaucracy of it. Like, this episode introduced us to some more Imperial characters, and a lot of it was just them dealing with bureaucratic infighting, like who had jurisdiction over stuff. And that like banality of evil in a lot of ways is just so fascinating and so true. How these things just become indifferent, and just the language that these villains use to just sort of dehumanize everybody around them, I think is just excellent. And so I just want to articulate that, and let's get into the nitty gritty so I can kind of talk about specifically where I see these elements that I'm sort of ranting and raving about. We start off the episode with a scene between Luthen and Andor, and I love Luthen's like really straightforward honesty with Andor. He's like, well, I can drop you off and let you go, you can come with me, or you could of course kill me. And I think that he knows that being that directly honest with Andor is the only way that he's going to get Andor to trust him very quickly and get him to do what he needs him to do. So Luthen is kind of manipulating Andor in this by being honest. And I love seeing like the many faces of Luthen that we get throughout this episode as we go forward, and I think that that's showcasing it. But he's not lying in any ways. Like, the thing that he brings up with Andor, like Andor brings up this fact that he used to fight against the Empire. He got tossed into this rebellion when he was a little kid that we kind of saw indicated it earlier. But he said, like, we were fighting each other in this big battle that I was doing. And that is exactly how fascist empires build themselves up. They make different groups fight each other and not the actual empire. They sort of build up resentments amongst people. But like get this group to hate this group and have them fight each other so they're not fighting us. And that's what this show is showcasing with Andor, and his disillusionment with all of these fights that has caused, and how he just sort of doesn't want to be in the rebellion or any sort of like group like that because of that. We also get little references to the fact that there are numerous little rebellion groups. He sort of like names off a few, and Lucian's like, aren't they all the same? And Andor's like, yeah, to me they are. And again, that showcases like there's not one unified rebellion that we get to see in A New Hope a few years down the line, but it's all messy. There's different sects. People aren't really working together. They don't trust each other. That's something that happens in fascism. These groups that rebel against these sort of authoritarian empires have to like form different groups, and they'll have different philosophy, different ideas. They'll just be naturally segmented from each other because they don't have the apparatus to connect as much, and have to work together in different ways and kind of disagree with each other. And I love those little hints of that, and we get to see a little bit more of that as this episode continues. So that's just the first scene, and we get to see that. And he does manage to inspire Andor to get into this fight, because he's like, look, do you want to live or do you want to thrive? Are you just trying to survive, or go for something more? Do you want to die? You're going to die to these people anyways. So do you want to die for something? It's like really great rhetoric that to get like Andor inspired to join this. And he's not like fully gung-ho, but he is moved enough to get in on this. And then I love that we get to see him joining this mission with Vel. And Vel is also sort of being used by Luthen, but Luthen's sort of like making a point, you need this other person. And she doesn't like that Andor has joined their mission against her concerns, but she has to sort of take it on to be the leader of this, and so she doesn't trust him. But then when we all the way get back to her group of her little sect of rebellion fighters that are planning this heist, essentially, which I'm excited for that, by the way, because I always love heist storylines. I love how they don't trust Andor either, and there's infighting amongst all of them. You know, a lot of the times when we depict rebellions, everyone's just sort of like generally agrees. Maybe there's a little bit of fighting here, but they generally are all on the same side and have a camaraderie. Here, like, no one really trusts each other. They kind of trust each other, but they're not really trained either. We have Nemik, who's a kid like falling asleep on the job because he's not a soldier. He doesn't have that training, but he is just this kid just trying his best because he believes it. And by the way, I love Nemik. He is so cute and lovely, which means I'm worried for him. I worry that he's probably going to die at some point to like inspire Andor to want to fight fully in the rebellion, because he's just a nice kid. So I'm assuming Nemik is probably on the chopping block for death, but I do like him. He is kind of adorable and sweet, but everyone else just hates Andor, and I just like seeing that distrust and messiness of these groups, because they would be that way. They wouldn't all just be naturally like, yeah, we're all friends here. Like they're working together because they kind of have to in this situation, and they're very distrustful because they've been had to be distrustful their entire lives. One person being someone who betrays in the Empire can get them all killed, and I love seeing that fear that they're all kind of run on. And just all of that is great. And I love learning about the heist. We're getting that set up. You learn what the rules are, and then you go and execute it in the next few episodes, and something go wrong, I'm sure, in the next episode. So excited to see all of that, and how they are always just, they don't really do any like I thought the last scene where they were all sitting around the fire was going to be like their bonding scene, but there was no bonding. They're like, here's the information you need to do. Hello, my cat's jumping on my lap. And then you're going to just have to execute it so that we can get the job done. Like there's no camaraderie here. And I'm assuming that they're highlighting that in this episode so that down the line, when we do start to see the rebellion form, there will be some sort of kinship and friendship formed among these people. That is ultimately what leads to these more unified movements. So just excellent job in displaying all of that. But then let's get to some of our villains. We get to meet Mira, who's this sort of, again, another middle manager Imperial character. And I should say, it was so cool to see Coruscant during the Empire. We've never actually gotten to see, I believe, off the top of my mind, Coruscant during this period of the Empire. We've only gotten to see it during the prequels, but it was used a lot, and in fact, initially introduced in the novels, the Star Wars Expanded Universe novels that are no longer canon. So I've always wanted to see an Imperial version of Coruscant that we now get to see. And again, I love this bureaucratic bureaucratic infighting that we get to see with Mira, who like is just trying to find ways to get jurisdiction over something. There's like this, we mentioned earlier, like there's this infighting amongst her with this other guy who's just like, he has more jurisdiction. He's the senior dude. She's trying to fight to get jurisdiction over him. She starts seeing a pattern. She's trying to prove herself to people above her. Like she's not actually like caring about the getting things done, really. She's more just like, I want to prove myself, so I'm going to find these patterns. I'm going to try and like work these things out and try and like prove myself to my superiors. And that ultimately, like, she's shown to be really good at her job in the last scene, but she's ultimately missing some of the small stuff. So she has this sort of chip on her shoulder that she wants to prove herself. But then I love like the small things that we get to see with this. We have our main guy in charge of her, Tagat, I believe is his name. I'm probably saying his name, the older dude. But like, I love that he says that she has impressive detention number quotas. Like she went up high above the quota, and it's like, yeah, it's about detaining people. It's not about like figuring out if they are doing right or wrong. It's about just detaining people and getting the numbers up. It feels like, again, that banality of evil in these societies. But then the way he speaks about like the things that they're doing, he says like, we're healthcare providers. We locate germs and we like kill them. We eliminate them. And he's talking about people. It's such dehumanizing language. And that, again, is an element of fascist dictatorships, empires. They dehumanize people as just germs to kill rather than actual people. That's how they're viewed when you sort of structure things this way. So good at just showing that. We also get our the like middle manager dude from the first episode, who was that security team who sort of like led the fight against Andor last episode, who was sort of like the very clearly like failed out of the military sort of guy who was like trying to live up to stuff. And I love that he goes and visits his mother on Coruscant. I'm curious to see what they're going to go with his character, because I could see him being built up to be either a villain or at least not necessarily here, but someone who eventually does work with the rebellion. So I'm curious if they're going to like have him be like this like radicalized dude who just gets more and more extreme, or because of the place that he's put into, or if he is going to join the rebellion, because he has also been tossed aside. They could go either way with his character, and I find that kind of fascinating with a character like that. Ultimately, I probably assume he's going to be radicalized more towards fascism, because that kind of fits for displaced young men like him who like feel like they don't live up to this version of masculinity that they're supposed to live up to, but they could go the other way. So I'm very curious to see him. And I think he's meant to be like a kind of juxtaposition against Andor in a way, because he goes to see his mom, which is who Andor was sort of dealing with his in last episode. So it's interesting to see that there's parallels between those two characters. So I really enjoy that. But then also, I haven't even mentioned Mon Mothma and Luthen. Great to see Mon Mothma. I really hope, honestly, I like seeing her here. And I hope that she is like the biggest character that we get in the show. Like, I don't want Obi-Wan. I don't want like the big people, like maybe a Saw Gerrera cameo or something, but I don't need to see like anyone higher than Mon Mothma this season. But I like seeing her here because, again, you get to see the banality of the world that she lives in, like the fear that she lives in. She's a senator working for the rebellion, but also has to keep it on the down low. She's being watched by her own driver, and like the things that Luthen has to do to like be a shopkeeper. And I love like Luthen like putting on that smile all the time because he's like putting up that front to just hide himself and do this work. And she has to constantly hide that. And then I love that she gets frustrated when she goes home and like they're having that governor dinner that she hates because like those people who that we'd be having dinner with like shut down their shipping lanes, which are going to starve hundreds of thousands of people. And yet she has to like sit and have dinner with them. And just again, the banality and indifference of people in power to those that they are hurting, the common people that they are killing with their policies and their indifference, just to gain more power and more money. It's really great. And I love seeing how Mon Mothma feels that in her soul. It just the upper class niceties that she has to deal with. So yeah, that's everything that I had to say. I am loving this show. This is fantastic. I am so impressed, and I really, really hope, like, if you're watching the show, please get the word out there about this one. Like I said, it's, I don't want to ever aggrandize Disney. I think this show is being made in spite of Disney, not because of Disney. But, at the very least, I'm glad that they're putting money towards a project. The visuals look great and all this stuff. So, yeah, I never thought I would see a show like this made by Disney. I'll put it that way. This is very, very good. This is very good. If not, again, it could crash and burn. Disney shows tend to suck towards the end of their run, so maybe the show will crash and burn towards the end. But as it's going so far, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all are taking care of yourselves. And everybody say hello to my cat, New, who's been on my lap here. And I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.